Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
We're all to give a warm Playa Del Rey welcome to our main speaker tonight, who is Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara Green and I'm an alcoholic. Is this, can you hear me? It's there? Okay. Hi. Thank you. I'd like to thank Rita for asking me to speak, and I always feel so honored when I'm asked to speak at an AA meeting, and then I immediately get terrified, because the fact is I want you to want me, but I don't want you to know me. And I start to tap dance in my head, and then I'll tell them the story about, and then, and I've been doing that since the day I got sober, and it's almost 12 years now. Okay, where do I start? I start with who I am. I'm Barbara Green Ruskin. I was born in Brooklyn a lot of years ago. And I hate the idea of being taped because I sound just like Joan Rivers without her wit. And I listen to myself on my telephone answering machine and cringe, and I'm alone in the room. I mean, nobody else hears me. Anyway. I love hearing New York accents. I love them. It's like smoke-filled rooms. I love smoke-filled rooms. I have not smoked for a long time. Anyway, I drank for a long time. I was born in a family of alcoholics, overeaters, crazy. My father's family were marvelous, interesting, insane people. My mother's family were boring, insane people. My father's family were all artists, they were all alcoholics. My mother's family were into money and into prestige and into professionals. And they did not like my father's family, and my father's family couldn't care less. And so my father taught me how to drink. He was an artist and a musician, and when I was born, they put me at a piano and discovered I was not a musician. Therefore, I went to art school. I mean, I had about that much choice. That's why I don't draw anymore, Dory. That was it. I started studying art formally when I was 10, and I was a professional illustrator for many years in New York. Anyway, I adored my father. He was a typical alcoholic father, which I must say, a series of men in my life resembled my father in all those, charming. Alcoholic men are wonderful. Even when they're sober, they're wonderful. Alcoholic women are wonderful. We are charming, we are bright, we are interesting people. And we've learned how to mask the fears that we walk around with. We've learned all kinds of techniques that have allowed us to cope. My father was a hard drinker, and he taught me how to drink when I was about 15 because you had to learn to drink like a man. We used to laugh at my mother with the slow gin fizzes and the frozen daiquiris. And I remember my first real date with a college man. I ordered Canadian Club Neat, and I was 15, lying. I mean, I pretended I was 21. I looked 12, and but that's how it went. I mean, and I loved the feeling of drinking. I loved all of it. I loved the taste. I loved the smell. I loved the ceremony. I still do. And I just don't do it. One of the things that, I mean, when I got sober, I said, you can drink Coca-Cola in my crystal wine glasses? What are you, crazy? It was real important. Everything had to be right about all those things, the ceremonies that were attached to drinking. And I went to college. I drank in high school, but really socially, I'm sure, I take it back, it wasn't socially. There were things that happened to me that I didn't know they were happening at the time, but when I listened to people talking here, I said, hey, that's what happened to me. It made me feel beautiful. It made me feel it made me feel older and sophisticated. I started school when I was very young. I was born into a family, my mother's family, my mother who pretended we were royalty. It's a hard thing to pull off in Brooklyn, but she did it. And so I went to private schools and had my clothes made by a tailor, I had clothes custom made, and I lived a very affluent life without any money. It was important to her to do that. She is still doing that, by the way. And she still says things like, nobody has to know. That's what I live with. My father, as I said, he drank and fell asleep. That was it. And he worked, and he supported my mother's entire family. And it was never enough. And it was I was ignored by too many adults in this household, and I was an isolator from the beginning. We lived in a big house in Brooklyn, and I lived in the attic, and I literally lived in the attic. They never saw me. I never came down. I got hungry once in a while and came down. Every kid in Brooklyn learned to smoke in that attic. And I mean, you don't have room like that in New York. I mean, you don't have the luxury of that kind of privacy usually. And I loved it. I still love it. I still love just being alone. But it's no longer really isolating. It's being with myself. I don't get enough of it these days because I'm married. And that's going on tape. Anyway, I went to private school, and I started school very young, so by the time I got into the public school system, I was much younger, and I was always very small and round anyway, and I was younger than everybody, and it was very difficult. I knew, the thing that I knew from the time I was very small was that you all had the secret to life. You all knew what it was about except me. You all were walking to the beat of a drummer. I was stepping in between the beats. I kept listening, I kept looking, I kept wanting to find that manual that told me how to live, how to know what to say. I knew you knew all the answers, and when I was in school and everybody was older than me, and I lived in a family that put on airs, and I was younger than everybody. I mean, I was lost. I was just lost, and I withdrew into my art. It really saved my life. And then in high school, I started dating, but really not much. I pretended to hate everybody because I was really terrified. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know who to say it to. The other group was always the in-group that I wasn't part of, so I would sort of hang around hoping that people would think I was. And I lived like that until I went to college. In college, what happened was I discovered that I wasn't so hot, that everybody could do a lot of things better than me. I got very good marks in school, and I graduated high school, and things like that came easily to me. I was totally ignored in my household. I wrote my first, and I might say my last novel when I was 14, and I am a writer today, and I worked very hard at my own thoughts and my own ideas. And somewhere in me, I knew that there was a higher power. I knew it, and I searched for it. I was a closet theologist, a theosophist. I was a closet questioner because with the intellectuals in New York, you didn't say God. You just didn't, because this was the era of existentialism, this was the 50s, you just didn't say it. So I searched. I joined a lot of movements. I went to a lot of churches. I read a lot of books. And I also knew something else. I came across a quote from Sartre. It was in No Exit, and it said that insanity is the separation from God. And I heard that, and I knew that's my problem. But I didn't know how to cure it. I discovered, in fact, when I got here, that was my problem, but I have found the answer here. And I knew when I got here that I kept drinking to fill up that hole, to connect, to find that connection to God, which I mean as my connection to you, to humanity. So there I was, walking to the wrong beat, feeling totally separate. I was spinning out there. Well, I met a man who was a perfect alcoholic husband, and we, danced and ate and drank all around New York, and I got married and got pregnant, had a baby, and he continued to dance and eat and drink, and left me home, and that lasted for 20 years because I had so grown up, I had lived for so long in an abusive family, because the only communication that my mother had to me was abusive, and she still does it, but today, well, sometimes she presses my buttons, but it's easy for her because she put them there, so she knows right where to go. But today it doesn't bother me anymore. And I lived in an abusive relationship for almost 20 years, and the good thing that came out of it were 3 wonderful daughters, one of whom has almost 12 years sober in this program also. And we separated after 20 years. By that time, after 18 years actually, by that time there was nothing left of me. I was so abused and so withdrawn and so chronically depressed, and I was a daily drinker. We started drinking, partying, because that was the way civilized people live. It was scotch before dinner, it was wine at dinner, and it was whatever after dinner. And I drank to oblivion. When I became single, I was married very young, so by the time I became single, it was, I was the first time I was really single, and that's when I really did it. I was so angry, I had to support. He left without any money. He left me without any money. He had it. And I had a sign over my desk that said, "Hating is motivating." And that kept me alive for years. And I supported 3 kids. I supported myself. I was a fashion illustrator in New York, and then it just fell apart, and I did a geographic out here. And 5 years later, I walked into the Alcoholics Anonymous, July 31st, 1981. I came here because God put me here. I knew at the time it was not by choice. I knew that this was being choreographed. I knew I was being carried someplace unknown. I had come into meetings about a year and a half before that by friends of mine who were telling me, "You got a problem, kid, and go do something about it." I ignored it. I didn't talk to those friends. I was angry. And one night I came to Rodeo. I had a few drinks before I came, because you just do. At 5, I had a problem with 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So my chapter 3 was I joined gyms, to which I did not go. I had a problem getting through cocktail hour. I could not drink at lunch. I could not drink after dinner, but I could not do between the hours of 5 and 8. I was in trouble. So I joined gyms, and then I didn't go. And so the dinner hours started getting earlier. I tried to do everything. And when I was missing deadlines, and I was getting into trouble. I didn't know it was interfering. I kept looking at the 20 questions, and I didn't see any problem with any of them. They were all no or yeah. Anyway, I came out on top. And it was all a lie, because who knew what was happening to me? Then I realized maybe I should do something about it. So I went to AA, I went to Rodeo Friday night. I thought it was the only meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I went back the next Friday night. I drank before I went, I drank in between, and I wasn't going to raise my hand because didn't want you to know I was new. And I thought you were all snobs. Nobody came up to me, put your arms around me, and gave me your phone numbers, so I didn't come back. One day I called up a friend, the one who had told me originally about it, and I said, I want to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And she said something like, "Why?" or something. And I said, "Because they're the best men in town are there." And she said, "We don't want women like you in there." Yeah. So I said, okay, and I didn't come back. And then one day, I met a guy in the program. In those days, if God wanted to get my attention, he did it through a man. And I met a guy in the program. I knew he was in the program, so I did my usual thing. I called, Central Casting and got the party cast over. I invited him for dinner and set it all up, and he had no choice in the matter. So there we were, a couple, instant. And I had to discover what you did between 4 and 8 in the afternoon if you didn't drink. He showed me. And I didn't realize what that sounded like. Anyway, one day I said to, and I didn't drink when I was with him, and then I said, well, I mean, I could have a drink before he comes, he won't know. So I had a drink before he came. Then I realized I was sneaking it, and I remember that from the 20 questions, and I said, he has a problem, not me, so why should I do that? So I drank in front of him. Then I'd have another drink, and he began to catch on, and he pulled away. And when he did that, I knew that there was a problem, and that's what, the feeling of shame that overtook me was so awful. I remember that feeling, it was so painful. And I called a friend, he had introduced me to a woman with the intent of 12-stepping me, of her to 12-step me. And I called her and I said, I need a meeting, would you take me to Alcoholics Anonymous? And she came over. And in the time between my call and time she came over, I remember I was just so shaky, and I walked into the kitchen and I heard this voice say to me, it's going to be okay, Barbara. And even if it's not okay, it's going to be okay, Barbara. And I knew it was okay. And she took me to an architect's meeting. It was Friday, and I have never had the desire to drink since. I have never had the craving to drink since. I have to correct that, because I do on occasion have a desire. Gee, I'd love to taste that wine or the exotic imported beers that my husband drinks. You know, I'd love it. I wish I could, and I can't. And I know I can't. And I have to remind myself all the time that I cannot do that. And so I don't. And I walked into the program, and that was a Friday. On Saturday, I went to Cedars, and I walked into that large room with all of your wonderful faces, and I was home. And I loved it. First of all, I always loved parties. I mean, instant party. I showed up with hors d'oeuvres. That's my whole first year. I went to party after party with hors d'oeuvres. And I remember that first meeting, they asked me to read chapter 5, and I got up on the stage, and I said, I'm home. Audience smiling, applauding. Wow, it's what I always wanted. You were going to pay attention to me. And then I heard people talking about things that I never would have the courage to talk about. And I saw 12 steps, and it told me how to live. And it said, if you do this, you will find a God of your very own. And I said, oh my God, this is really what I've always wanted. And when you said, I love you, I believed you. I'd never believed that. When you talked to me and I answered you, you listened to me. That is probably one of the greatest assets. That has gotten me so far in this world. When I say, hello, how are you? I shut up and listen. We learned that here. I got a sponsor. I said, okay, I don't know what you've got, but I don't want what I got. So I'm going to do it your way. So whatever you told me to do, I did. I didn't do it willingly, but I did it. I rationalized, I argued, I said but, and I had to know the reasons why, and I drove a lot of people crazy. Everybody that said call me, I called. I did, I wasn't working because, I didn't know I didn't have a career, by the way. I didn't know my life was unmanageable. I thought it was just fine. To this day, I still believe I took 3 years off of work to write. I couldn't get a job, if you want to know the truth. I did a lot of freelance writing at that point. I had stopped drawing. I had stopped learning my living as an artist. I didn't do any of that in this city. In fact, I did all that in here. But then when I came out here, I started writing. I was doing copywriting at the time. And I did what I could. And I lived. Now, we'll get into sobriety. First year of sobriety, I had 8 days sober. In fact, I got a phone call from New York when my sister-in-law called and said, are you still willing to give your kidney to your brother? And I said yes. So the first year of sobriety, at 10 months sobriety, I was a kidney donor. This was a real interesting experience. I was not young when I got sober. I had to make this work for me because I didn't have a lot of time. I could not go in and out. So when this happened to me, I really, thank God it happened when I was still in a fog. I mean, I was so new, I cannot tell you the drama. I mean, I am still embarrassed at what I did at meetings with the drama of this. And this is not an ordinary everyday event. And I milked it for all it's worth. And anyway, it went on for a year, went back and forth with testing. One day, I realized what this was about. I gotta tell you something, my brother and I had no relationship. We did not talk to each other for years until this happened. And I realized one day what this was about. I had heard that the word love was an action word, and I understood that's what was happening. I was learning what love was. I didn't think I had to go to this extent to learn what love was about, but as I said, I had to learn it fast because I didn't have a lot of time. My sponsor came to New York with me because I was terrified of the drugs. I was so frightened. I got to tell you, the poison of my choice was scotch, and the more I drank, the more expensive the scotch got because I didn't want to be an alcoholic, and I figured alcoholics only drank cheap booze. So I was spending all my money on good booze. And then I also loved Valium because I just couldn't stand any feelings, and I loved just being out there. I couldn't take any uppers because I was always so hyper, and I still am. And that was basically what I did, is I drank liquor. I say scotch, but I drank anything. I mean, I drank anything that was in front of me. And wine was too slow for me. Anyway, so I was terrified of the pills. I was afraid of the drugs. I was afraid of having to take painkillers. She came to New York with me, and I remember the day before surgery saying to her something that I was so afraid to say before: what if it doesn't work? What if the kidney doesn't take? And she said, it's third step time. And we talked about the third step. And I learned the third step. I learned that I had to do the third step. And I learned something else. It didn't matter whether I ever did the third step. God's will is done. Whether I like it or not, whether I accept it or not, that's what happens. And whatever happens is God's will. Well, we went through the surgery, and I spouted program to my family, which was pretty wonderful. I discovered something else, too. When I said to my brother, stay in the moment, stay in the present, and he said, the moment stinks, the present stinks, I've lost the use of my kidneys, something occurred to me. You can make your own present. You can make your own moment. How about you're getting a new kidney instead of I mean, you know, it's the glass half full, but it works. It really works. That was my first year of sobriety. In my third year of sobriety, it gets better. I was attacked. I was violently attacked. I was raped. And 10 days later, I was told I needed open heart surgery. That was a pretty heavy year. When I was taken into the police station afterwards, they came in and offered me Valium, and I really knew that I could take it. Nobody would argue, would they? This guy came in and, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no. I looked at the policewoman, and I said, this is the time for me to get grateful. Would you please hug me? Would you hold me? And she did. I could feel her bulletproof vest. She said, I used to do this, but sometimes people don't like it. And I said, hold me. And she did. And the police in West Hollywood were wonderful. They took such good care of me. I moved into my ex-lover's house, who was a wet alcoholic, and I lived with him for 1.5 years while he took care of me, and I had the surgery. I gave up smoking in intensive care because they wouldn't let me put it in my mouth with the tubes down my throat. I say that to everybody who smokes, and I had a heart valve put in. I learned while living with a wet alcoholic my loathing for alcoholics that I got from my family, which meant that I had to deal with my own self-loathing. I had 4 years of sobriety at this time. This was such a shock to me. And that began the real active period of forgiving, because that's what this program's about. It's about accepting yourself. You go from I guess it's 1 through 12, doing that, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. What happened? I guess that was the end of the real drama. I eventually went back to work. I eventually began getting my life back together. And about my 4th year of sobriety, I heard that there was a man who I really cared about had divorced. A man I had gone out with when I was drinking, who left me because of my drinking. I called him and said, I'm interested if you are. He called me back, and today we're married. And when I asked him why did he marry this other person who he said it was just, he doesn't know, it was beyond him. And I realized God had put him in storage for me. And that's a happy ending story. I'm married to a wonderful man who is not an alcoholic. He's sober. That's a trip, living with a sober mind. I mean, we talk Greek to each other sometimes. We just don't understand. I've had an incident where a friend owes me money, and yesterday I got bankruptcy papers in the mail, and I went, oh my God. And so I had to call her, and he kept saying, why? I mean, you're not going to get the money back. Why? And I looked at him like he was talking Greek. I mean, he says, you've got to accept this. What are you talking about, accept it? I don't have to accept anything. I'll go down kicking, I'll go down screaming. And he said, okay, go call. I called. He said, now do you feel better? I said, yeah, I accept it. I accepted it yesterday, but at least I acted in my own behalf. He didn't know what I was talking about. He says, fine. And, and he's an actor. He takes every day's rejection. That's the way it is. It has nothing to do with him. He lives a balanced life. It drives me nuts. And, but it's an interesting experience. And I've got a lot of time yet. Let me talk about this program. I've learned a lot of things here. I would not trade one day of the last 12 years, my worst day, and there were years and years of pain. I had no money. I had no hope of getting any money. I didn't know how I was going to pay the rent. I remember one morning, and I say this for anybody who is in this space, or to remember it when you get there, because we all get there at some point. It may not be money, it may be health, it may be a lover, it may be anything, but there is a point of despair. And I said to my sponsor, why? Why do I have to? I thought I paid my price. I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, I've done that. Why? She said, you may never know why. You may never know what the lessons are. And I decided that's not good enough, so I made up my own lesson. I decided that God had done this for me because I was special, that I could do it, and therefore I was better than all of you. I really decided that it wasn't a question of better, it was that I could do it, I needed to do it, I needed to do it to share it, I needed to get through this so that I could tell other people, or other people could see you can get through this. And I did. It was a fantasy that I created. It was my own special relationship, because I still need to feel special. But it was my own thing that I created in order to get through that horror, and it was horror. There was something else that I wanted to share. Before I had the heart surgery, I was in magnificent denial. When the doctors told me I needed this, I said, you're hysterical and you're lying, and I walked out of the office and I ignored it. And at that point, I started to give up smoking, and at that point, I started jogging, and I had the kind of problem with my heart was you don't get a heart attack, you drop dead. And so when the doctors found out what I was doing, they wanted to chain me. And so I wasn't sharing about it, I wasn't talking about it, but people who were close to me knew. And one day, I was at a Thursday night meeting, and a guy named Bobby J., remember Bobby Jameson? And he came up to me and he said, what's the matter with you? I mean, aren't you angry? Aren't you mad? Aren't you, I don't, what's wrong? I said, no, everything's fine. What? Nothing, everything's fine. And I was sitting there, and it was a room like this. We were sat around tables, and all of a sudden, I started to share. And I'll tell you something. I looked in that room, and there were people in that room that had given me, over the years, permission to be angry. I could see those people had been angry, and they didn't fall apart. They didn't disintegrate. They didn't burst into flame. They were angry, and then they came out the other side. I didn't know that. Ladies don't get angry. And I was, you knew throughout all the drinking and everything, I was always a lady. So I started to share, and something overtook me. The anger was so tremendous that I can remember taking the table in my feet. I could have broken that. I could have thrown it across the room. I talked about staying sober. I talked about being the noble person who gave my kidney. I talked about not drinking. I talked about sponsoring. I talked about showing up. I talked about everything. Why? Because I was convinced I was going to die, by the way. I was convinced I was going to die. And I did not realize that I was in denial. I did not realize the fear I had. But I let it out. That night, what was happening up until that point was I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that was when the man broke into my house. When the doctors told me that I had needed surgery, I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with my teeth chattering. I was in such fear. That morning, after that night, I woke up at 3 in the morning, and second time, another burning bush experience, as I fondly call them, I heard the voice telling me it was going to be okay. and I went back to sleep. Now, this is what I believe. I believe that when we share in meetings, we unclog a channel. I really believe that. We allow something else in. And it worked for me. It's worked for me so well that the night before surgery, I didn't even take a sleeping pill. And when I woke up out of the anesthesia, and I woke up and I regained consciousness, and I said, I'm alive, God, thank you. And every morning, since November 19th, 1984, I have said, good morning, God, thank you. The gratitude that I have for my life today is the life that I always dreamed somebody else would have. I still have to step back and look at it because I don't relate to it. I have wonderful work. I realize something, that I'm doing what I always wanted to do. I didn't know that. I didn't know I was doing it until last week when I stepped out and looked at it. I said, hey, this is what I set out to do. I'm writing. I write full-time as a living, and that's fine, but I also write fiction for love. That's my soul food. I need it, and I finally accepted I need it. I finally accepted that I know how to do it, that I'm okay at it. I'm married to a wonderful man who's a good friend, who's a legendary nice guy, and who is my best friend, who I can always count on, we've got money in the bank. We go on trips. We talk to each other. We fight once in a while, and he doesn't leave me when we fight. Isn't that amazing? I was sure that if you told somebody you didn't like what they did, that was the end of them. And he doesn't walk out. And my children are wonderful. We have a great relationship now. I still have problems with one of my children who will hang the phone up on me, and we can go for months without talking, and we still have a problem, but we can talk about it. Or I can say, if you're going to talk to me like that, I'm going to have to hang up the phone now because I don't want to be spoken to. I don't want to be treated like that any longer. They're not ashamed of me anymore. They invite me places. They say that I'm their mother. I mean, that's wonderful. I'm even getting to have a relationship with my mother. When my father died, I tried real hard to mend the relationship with my father. I had tremendous resentment and anger towards him, but he would not acknowledge anything, and we just couldn't communicate. When he died, I decided that I could not live with the relationship as it stood. I had to resolve it, so I gave a eulogy at his funeral. And what I knew, if I stood up in front of all those people, I could not say my father was a son of a bitch and ignored me my whole life. I couldn't do it. I had to find something good about it. And God wrote that eulogy. I was telling Connie just before he came in, I did it on the plane going back east, and it defied editing. I had to read it exactly as it was in a first draft. And it said that if I was to honor my father, that I was to use who I am to its fullest. If I was to be his daughter, I was to use that. Because he gave me gifts. He gave me the love of art. He gave me the love of music. He gave me the love of laughter. He gave me the love of good scotch. And it wasn't bad. While it lasted, it was good. It was fun. And then it didn't work anymore. And I drank longer than most, which didn't mean it was fun longer than most. I just kept at it longer than most. And he gave me a lot. And today, I'm glad for my father. I wished it were different. You see, what was the hard thing about that relationship was that I had to be able to forgive. I had to accept him who he was. We were not going to walk off into the sunset with that wonderful, Ozzie and Harriet relationship that I wanted, that I thought other people had. Today, as I said, life is even. I love it. I love the boredom of it. I don't need to live on the edge any longer. I love being a grown-up. I actually feel like a grown-up, and I feel responsible. I'm proud of who I am. I love the women who I sponsor. I have made wonderful friends of those women. They are very special people in my life. The friends that I've made in this program. I love being with women. I like the kinds of relationships through my sponsors, and I never had a sponsor who betrayed me or I ever felt did. I learned trust. I really learned trust. I have no problems with that with women. What has happened in my life, and I say this humbly, that I feel I can do a fifth step with almost anybody. I have accepted my own humanity. I wish things were different. I wish I could lose 20 pounds. I wish I didn't have, I wish I wasn't so compulsive. I wish I made more money, and so what? I have learned a technique, rare gift of staying in the moment. I work at it. I am here now. I see your faces. I love it. I don't want to lose this moment. There aren't a lot of them in life. When I was in the hospital with the heart surgery, you know how we are. We hear someone's in the hospital, everybody's running. There are meetings, there are phone calls, there are people, there are crowds. And one of the other women there said to me, "How can you stand all being bothered so much?" And I looked at this poor thing. I mean, how could you not stand all that love, all that feeling? I mean, isn't it wonderful that little Bobby Doberman from Brooklyn can stand up here in Los Angeles and not feel threatened by all of you, that I could tell you who I am without embarrassment, without shame? I mean, that's mind-boggling. At least it is for me. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I got to thank you all for my life, because it's a real treasure. Thanks. And I guess that's it, huh?
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button. swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.